Hi, I'm Dazza Greenwood at the MIT Media Lab, and I'm just getting a demo now from the STAR team and great collaborators of ours in Kansas City, who are going to be showing their newest and greatest on contracts. So Brian Wilson and Paul Barham are helping to lead this. And guys, take it away. What you got?
Hi, I'm Brian Wilson, and we've got Paul Barham, we've got Dazza, we've got Jim Hazard, we've got Tanner, we've got Joe, we've got Michael Robeck, the CTO of the law school here at UMKC, and we're all part of a law, technology, and public policy course. And what we've been doing lately is trying to combine different sets of user data with system rules in order to generate some user-specific contracts and facilitate the creation of legal components, repositories of model text, and we believe this can be really helpful within the context of smart cities and open data portals, and even further down the road as something on top of the blockchain or in connection with blockchain. And so what our project really is trying to do is connect the best minds of various cities in a way that will allow them to work on different substantive portions of what they're good at instead of messing around with all of the sort of mundane aspects of things like filling in templates and forms. And this automates that, so you can spend more time taking on more applicants. You can spend more time working on the agreements themselves, and really we believe this will lead to more representative best practices nationwide and will increase access to justice. This shared knowledge. And then the types of users that we have include citizens, hackers, internal workers at a government level, researchers, academics, reporters, startups, and many more. And we're hoping that this can affect as many people as possible, because all of these parties can benefit from having these things streamlined and improved. To start, we really broke down what an agreement is, and we believe every agreement can be thought of as a series of obligations or rules that have different layers. And some of those layers are based on minimum standards, which are going to be common to every agreement. And then there are also going to be more specific obligations based on the specific goals of the parties. And we started to look at these different series of obligations, not as text, but as components that sort of work together within a machine. And this is a picture that we sort of started working on, or started conceptualizing a lot of this with.
This is kind of showing an agreement in its sections,
Yeah.
and the possible clauses that could go with that. And so it's kind of like one of those old kids' toys where you can change the top of the head, the middle of the head, the bottom of the face, and the body. But you're doing it actually with legal clauses on an agreement.
Yes.
And the power of this is that we're envisioning that once you use a clause, you will be able to see who else is using it and whether it's been litigated or not.
And it can also help with things like the plain text of the agreement. So if you're not really sure what an agreement is saying, you can click on one of the clauses and a card will pop up, sort of like in this agreement where there are the deeper layers to the clauses. You can click a clause. You can, from clicking on that clause, you see the card that has things like the plain text, the clause name, the clause type, where the clause came from, rate of litigation, number of times it's been reused. And so hopefully this is helpful. And then from typing these clauses into this form here on the left, you can then lay some sort of API on top of it to pull it into whatever format it is that you want. and really begin like customizing these components as you want to, so that they show the information that you believe is most relevant. And in order to facilitate a lot of this happening, we started out with a series of templates. So when we say template, we mean like a very basic structure that has the different types of clauses that make up the agreement. And then from there, we envision being able to click on something like the operation of the sensor network, and then you can look through, maybe you want to operate the system network yourself, or maybe you want the city to operate it, or maybe you have to pay a certain amount of money to help with the operation of the sensor network, or maybe you have to contribute a certain amount of computing power or electricity or anything like that. But this form will allow people to go into the library, pick the clause text that they find most suitable for their agreement, and then create a document that way. From there, you start getting into the question and answer type section. So originally we started out with data sharing agreements. And with those, there are going to be different levels of sensitivity for each different data type, and some are more sensitive than others. So you would have higher legal standards that you would need to meet in order to release that data. So with this agreement that we have, we created this question: does your information contain information, or does your agreement, or does the data you're seeking contain information protected by FERPA, HIPAA, both, or neither? And for this example, you can see we have this FERPA option, and if you click that FERPA option, up on the right would pop up an agreement that includes all of the additional definitions you would need in order for this data sharing agreement to be executed. And then here is an example of creating a card with the user data up on the left, combining that card with the template in the lower left, and then using that to produce the agreement on the right. So you'll notice on the left the city name's Pleasantville, on the right that corresponds directly. And then on the lower left you also have all of the other corresponding bits of text that are coupled with the user information above it and generates the different agreements on the right. But you'll notice this text in red is text where whoever is the city attorney or whoever is looking over this agreement will have some choices, or could have some choices, to pick what type of standard that they want to have in. And I think in this case it's for access to the data. So the lawyer in that event would be able to toggle between whatever standard they thought was appropriate. They thought was appropriate based on maybe the other information that is in the agreement that they don't think can be written into the program with system rules. And so it still allows for that flexibility, which we think is a benefit. And what we're coming up with right now, I think Paul can speak a little bit more to this, but it's basically gives a nicer user interface.
Yeah, this is the interface I put on top of Common Accord, and basically with Common Accord there's an edit sleeve where it shows you the variables that have not been filled out, and by putting a file alongside of it we can actually insert some HTML and then talk about the fields and then write them back. So this is just now being developed.
Yeah, and in the future, some of the things that we've started to look toward include this new way to bring agreements from like a Word file and put it into this system. And I think, Joe, if you're on, could you speak a little bit to this since you created it?
Sure. Just the basic idea was to give people a friendly and intuitive UI for parsing these agreements out, so that your average attorney on the street can go through and become the architect for one of these agreements, create the template. And if you've got an alliance of cities that are all using the same repository, then this person could be a legal expert rather than a coder. So basically, you import your basic confidentiality agreement that has all the parts, but it's one that you actually use. You know how you want that to change for the different cases, for the different cities, however you're doing it. But so you drag it in from Word, say, and you just paste it over here on the left where it says confidentiality agreement. And then you highlight, each individual clause, and then you go over and you hit the button marked that says marked subclause. And then you go and you rename it where it says C1 descriptions. Then you go and you select, say this clause is going to have, different cases, and it's going to do different subclauses depending on what you need from it. So you go in and you select the second paragraph, and then you say subclause, and then it automatically creates a subclause, and you rename that. And then you go through the rest of the agreement, and you mark the different clauses. Then you go over, once you've got all the clauses marked, you go over to cases, and of course the power for these comes in the questions that you're asking. So when your builder comes through, your architect's laid all the groundwork, your builder comes through and they're going to select, I need this is a contract for a private company. It's got a confidentiality clause, so I'm going to say yes to the confidentiality clause. I'm going to say yes to the private sector clause, and I create. But the architect is creating these questions, and so over here where it says in your question text, you just tell it what the question is. You tell it what the first response is. Right now we've already got a yes and no question in, but we're going to create a second multiple choice question, and then as you add, you've got the yes, the no, the answer A, the answer B, and you go up here where it says recipient. Back to the previous slide, please, where it says next slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
Where it says recipient shall use the confidential information, and you click down through each of your 4 cases here, and you say what you want that to say based on what the questions are and what the answers are that are given. And then once you've got that done, next slide. The software automatically goes through and it looks for names in brackets, and that could be whatever format we eventually decided on. Right now I've got it in a Microsoft Word friendly format, the same one that they use for their mail merges, and you basically go through, and for each of these you just say what the question is that you want the software to ask the end user, and you get that information in there, and then it's ready to go. The whole contract has questions that determine which clauses it puts in. It knows what questions to ask as far as what all these different names are in the contract, and then you can publish it, and you put that up, and it goes into your repository, and then any of the city attorneys in your confederation can all pull this contract. They could take it back to the architect board if they wanted it to change, or they could just run it through the builder software that says, here's the specific stuff we want. You don't have to go research the clauses because somebody else has already done that, and then you're just ready to publish it and put it up on your website for somebody to download and use.
Okay, wow. And we see the real benefits to this as a tool that creates more succinct policy both internally and externally. Internally, it'll help departments figure out what language everyone is using and get on the same page, but externally it'll help cities who are forking these agreements and really figuring out which ones are the best. It'll help them also get on the same page. And that speaks to the second benefit we have listed here, where it allows the drafter or the author to use the proven legal components, because with the system or with Common Accord, the way that it is now, you can see, like in there's a link to in each agreement to the GitHub page, and you can see who's forked it and who's modified it and how they modified it and whether those changes were accepted or denied. As we said before, this reduces stress on the legal system, leads to more representative best practices, enables more civic engagement, and leads to a lot of collaboration with other organizations. So we see this as potentially a benefit not only to cities and municipalities, but also to smaller firms who maybe specialize in one type of practice. They could then work with other smaller firms across maybe their city and have like a de facto law firm that just each person specializes in one type of agreement and can do their own thing.
And the other place where we saw that this would be very strong and usable is within a consortium of organizations.
Yeah.
Like cities would be willing to actually help each other with their clauses and actually build the libraries that are useful for them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, the next steps that we have, tomorrow we're actually going to be presenting at what we've got going on called the Prototype Jam. It's sort of the capstone event for the Law, Technology, and Public Policy course.
Trademarked by Dawson.
Yeah.
Yes, I authorize and encourage you to use my trademark here. No infringement when you're a welcome guest.
It's always good. Tomorrow I think we're going to be working with some UI, UX people from a college that's nearby. And then we're really trying to build out the specific use case that we've been developing, and that's been the Smart City Data Sharing Agreement use case, and really delineate between each different role and define the workflow a little bit better and keep going from there. So I think that's all we've got.
Wow, you guys, that's remarkable. So I think that we've got a couple of people on board here from that are associated with MIT's FutureCommerce hackathon coming up next week, and with Sandy Pentland's group generally, who can provide a little bit of feedback for you on this. But I want to kick it off by saying that is extraordinary how much progress you've made since the National Day of Civic Hacking, my favorite named event that Code for America puts on in, God, when was it? In the late spring? I think it was like
6th, I think. June 6th.
Yeah, not long ago. This really got started in earnest, and we kind of brainstormed the idea of having kind of clause banks or libraries and putting together in this way. And you've really just done great work iteratively in building teams in open to get to this point. So just number one, I want to say kudos. Specifically, I guess I have a question, which is where's the code that Joe talked about, and how does it connect with, like how could it be used? Is it available for general hacking, or is it sort of like a side thing, or what?
It's really just in the mock-up phase right now.
That's the best.
Yeah, like I know Paul's got a working the UI for Common Core works.
Somewhat. Parts of it work well.
So I think our next step is trying to figure out how we can actually take this from a mock-up to a more usable tool.
Fantastic. Thank you for saying that. So that's great. I wasn't sure the way. I mean, Joe, you ought to go into sales at some point there, because the way you're describing it sounded like it was packaged, finished software that maybe I should be buying at some point. But
well, I'm glad you can have it for about $600.
I'll do it. Okay, well, can I do that in installments? We can maybe take it off your enrollment fee for the.
There we go.
But if that was good, and I'm glad to hear that it's something that's available to be hacked and presumably in open source is terrific. That'll make it a lot easier to get more people, and I'll absolutely lend it. I'll pull an oar on that one. That's a really good vision, and the extensibility to Word or any processor package is terrific. I think we're joined by Adrian Gropper now, who's a co-organizer of the event and a collaborator of the Human Dynamics Group, MIT grad, but he's a medical doctor who runs Patient Privacy Rights, and has been helping. He has a project in the hackathon as well, and today convened a legal group a legal group for UMA, user managed access, kind of OAuth thing, where people got very interested in doing a hackathon project with contracts using Common Accord, and I suggested maybe the IAuth design pattern, where basically we take off individual authorizations and we figure what the hash digest for that would be, and hash it in with the rest of the contract, and that's as far as we got. But the idea today was, well, couldn't we put that in the blockchain? And couldn't that be kind of what we actually do with Common Accord to get it to, a little closer to smart contracts or dynamic, and to get involved in the blockchain? And Adrian took to it. A lot of people on the call seemed to take to the idea. So Adrian, you were kind of shepherding that, and also you'll be like one of the people helping to recruit and evaluate projects. Do you have any feedback on this team, and then any thoughts about the potential fit between the people that we talked to today at the hackathon and this project here?
Yes, this is fabulous. I've been following Common Accord for maybe 2 years now, working with Jim on and off, and this is a great extension or layer on top of Common Accord. So that's first off. This is obvious. The second thing is, once you've got coded clauses, you have the opportunity to actually have them control transactions. And the project that I'm promoting at the FutureCommerce Hackathon is basically focused on, it's literally the complement of what you were just almost showing. The contract is not a non-disclosure agreement, it is a disclosure agreement, which in healthcare is called a release of information form. But it has exactly the same characteristics. It's a contract between two parties. One of them is an institution, the other one is the principal or the subject, and it's a consent for release of information, ROI. There's this whole other universe out there called UMA that Daza just mentioned, that has to do with standardizing the way two institutions trade information about you or me with each other under this contract that was just approved, that most people would have called a consent. But it's not really a prior consent in the old world sense, which really doesn't work anymore. It's really a contract for agency, if you would, that then introduces transparency into the whole process. It makes it much more robust. I know I'm going too fast, but I just want to give.
That's okay. And just a quick side note, Brian and Joe and everyone, when Adrian said agency there, he actually meant agency as an agency law, what you had to learn. So like we've introduced that into the UMA conversation through a legal subgroup that Adrian ran today. And so they're talking about who's the principal, who's the agent, who's the third party, who would be, the party holding the risk of loss, what authorizations, was there explicit authority, implied, etc. All the things that the analysis you would go through in order to do a liability analysis, basically, in an agency situation, which is, if you're a lawyer and you look at OAuth 2 and you look at these authorization systems that are automatic, it's one of the first things we think of, that in contracts. Non-lawyers don't really know about agency law. It's not commonly known, but this group knows about it. Adrian has pored over the restatement second of agency, and he's like, and we do carefully, mapped it to the technology. So just so you know, when he said agency, he wasn't kidding. Like, he's ready to have the conversation. Back to you, Adrian, and then we should let Ellie speak if she has anything to say, and then try to wrap this so people could see it that might want to join the project and we don't wear them out. Sorry, back to you.
So anyway, what I'm saying is that there will be a parallel project at FutureCommerce that is, in effect, hooks into the output of what you just showed, in order to allow for information to move from one institution to another under the clauses of the contract that you just designed. And that project is called HIE of 1, and keep an eye out for it, and maybe consider joining at least and splicing into it as part of whatever demo or outcome we put together.
Awesome. Something important. I was just thinking something very important. Oh, that's right. HIE of 1. Thanks, you, Paul. So Paul's saying HIE of 1, and so the important part is HIE is health
Information
exchange. HIE, yeah. So I'm sorry, Paul wrote HEI, health information exchange. And so what Adrian's talking about is exactly what you guys have been modeling right along. He's talking about a HIPAA a consent to disclosure of HIPAA covered information. So literally the contract he's talking about is one that is a HIPAA consent, is exactly what he's talking about. So it's like point blank along with FERPA of the stuff that you've been modeling all along. And he's found a clause from a hospital that, a contract that he thinks is pretty good. It's a standard clause. It should be nothing new to you guys. It's very similar to the stuff in our GitHub repo, but it has the advantage of being one that Dr. Adrian Gropper, has been doing work on, and that he's introduced this whole legal group to. So Dr. Gropper's got an analysis that is hospital facing and also regulatory facing on this consent, and he understands how it fits within the requirements of hospitals and third parties systems, and what they're reluctant to do and what they're ready to do. So it's definitely worth sinking your teeth into what Adrian's found here, like his HIPAA form, and it's connected to your data sharing HIPAA agreements directly. So I wanted to just highlight that. Nice.
I'm assuming this is sort of closely aligned with what Jim's doing for the global line. Is it? I know he was doing some work with them. Is this sort of in parallel with that, or?
It's in parallel. Jim has had a lot of input into what I've been doing, but this is much more about the transaction rather than the consent. The group that you mentioned, GH something, GC, is still interested in prior consent or informed consent, whereas on how data might be used. Whereas what we're building is based on this UMA standard, is authorization for specific data transactions. So when you have something like a genome or a drone camera or a body cam on a cop, anything that's really sort of has high dimensionality of data, getting prior consent or getting informed consent for how to use that becomes almost meaningless. It is meaningless. How can you give informed consent on use of your genome, or on use of or access to the drone that Amazon is flying, or the Street View? I mean, we all remember, you guys as lawyers probably know a lot more about it, the Street View debacle with Google going around taking images, and both here in this country and particularly in Europe, as they were driving around with the Street View camera, and then the number of privacy hassles that they got into, and this was 5 or 10 years ago. Nowadays, that would be completely unacceptable to be running around and taking pictures. So the point that I'm making is that HIPAA is, HIPAA's 10 years old, 20 years old. It does not handle, it handles whether your HIV status is positive or not, or what you had for breakfast, but it is not enough to handle high-dimensional data like genomes or body cams or drones. And so we need now to have this much higher scale layer of not only having the contract that allows you to share the information, which is kind of like the NDA that you showed, but also the ability to manage policy-based authorization for transactions based on that contract or under that contract.
Yep. Awesome. So short answer, yes, in terms of the connection with the gym stuff, and the longer answer is heck yes. And he's talking about like really supercharging your project and putting it to work by getting some of the parameters and values of those clauses and having them drive systems, like medical record sharing systems back to your personal health record system or to your phone or etc. Okay, well, it seems like we have a match here. So this recruiting session. Ellie and Adrian, I think, has been fruitful. We've done talent scouting, and we've got a big pool of talent and innovation as usual in Kansas City, Missouri. And I hope that you guys will be willing, Kansas City, to come and join us next weekend at FutureCommerce Hackathon, and that you knock it out of the park for the prototype jam in UMKC Law School tomorrow. Sorry I can't join you for that. As we're getting this, I was planning to be there, but as we're getting this together and ramping up, it seemed like this is the best timing. And hey, after all, now we're able to use the internet so that we can see your demo and give you some feedback before tomorrow, and that we can now roll it right up to our hackathon next week, and hopefully you can participate. I can tell you, online people are going to be first-class citizens in this hackathon, not like also ran. So it's all going to be online. You can win $1,000 in prizes or more. So far, it's $1,000 cash prize. Get GitHub private repos, maybe even come to CodeProm, first annual code. What's that? Wouldn't you like to know? Well, come register at the hackathon. But how do we register, Daza? I mean, I don't understand what you're talking. Well, let me explain. What you do is you just go to futurecommerce.civics.com and just click the join button. It's almost too easy at the princely price of free. Because knowledge and collaboration should be free, and with Google Hangout, hey, why not? And so Ellie, I don't know if are you online there? Maybe you can join us for the. Ellie has actually opened my eyes. She's a comp sci and joined us in SUNY Albany, and she goes to a lot of hackathons and has clued us into how to make a social track, a learning track, and some great stuff. I'm not sure. So your video is not on now, but anyway, Ellie is with us in saying with Adrian and I, thank you guys very much for your demo, and we look forward to seeing you next week at FutureCommerce and hooking you up with the Bitcoin people and this blockchain idea that we mentioned that Adrian's been heading. Okay. So.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Great.
Dynamite.